When a cheating scandal is uncovered by the organization behind the standardized tests, a group of students is called to testify about their impressive grades. The first student is Lynn, the top student in her class, and a winner of many math competitions. Lynn's mother left a few years ago after a divorce, so now it's just Lynn and her dad, who earns a modest salary as a teacher. Her story begins when her dad tries to enroll her in a prestigious school. Lynn doesn't want to go there because the enrollment fee and other expenses will cost them a lot of money, and she doesn't want to burden her dad. Lynn demonstrates her ability to calculate all the expenses in her head, impressing the principal, who offers her a scholarship. Lynn happily accepts. Later, while taking photos for her student ID, Lynn meets Grace, a friendly and wealthy girl who is more interested in becoming an actress than studying. Grace doesn't mind that Lynn is a bit awkward and nerdy, and they quickly become friends. The two immediately hit it off and become good friends. Grace's grades have been passable until one day the school announces a new rule. The general average must be around 3.2. Desperate not to fail school and disappoint her parents, Grace asks Lynn to be her tutor, who accepts after some hesitation. On the day of the exam, Lynn tries to be encouraging by pointing out these are the exercises they've practiced, but Grace is still completely lost. Lynn flies through her test, answering everything easily, but she can't stop worrying about Grace. If Grace fails, Lynn will lose the company of the first friend she ever had. At that moment, she decides to help her, so she writes the correct answers on an eraser, takes off her shoe, and drops the eraser in it. Then she kicks the shoe back to Grace, who sent her own shoe back. Unfortunately, she kicks it too hard, and it ends up in the middle of the classroom. But thankfully, Lynn quickly solves the problem by standing up and stepping on the shoe as she goes to hand in her finished test. Grace uses the eraser and successfully passes the test with a 3.87 GPA. To celebrate, Grace invites Lynn to hang out at her pool, where they're joined by Grace's boyfriend Pat, who is also rich. Grace tells Pat about their trick for cheating during tests, and Pat sees a money-making opportunity. He offers Lynn a large sum of money to help him and his friends cheat on all their exams. At first, Lynn refuses, saying she doesn't need the money. But then Pat reveals that even with her scholarship, her father is still paying a lot of administrative fees. When Lynn gets home, she searches her father's desk and finds paperwork confirming what Pat said. Her dad is paying a lot of money with his small teacher salary, which makes Lynn cry. Later, while practicing the piano, she asks her dad why he sent her to the expensive school. He says he wants her to have better opportunities and maybe study abroad, ignoring Lynn when she says she was happier at her previous school. After her dad goes to bed, Lynn keeps practicing the piano and realizes her fingers could be used for signaling answers during tests. The next day, she accepts Pat's offer and teaches the group how to cheat. Since the test is multiple choice, she assigns each letter to a specific hand pattern. The students just have to memorize the patterns, which they disguise as piano lessons, providing a legal alibi. From then on, the group begins cheating on every exam. Lynn moves her hand on the desk in a way that looks innocent, and the others watch and decode the signals. The teachers don't suspect anything, and everyone passes their exams with great grades. The cheating business grows, and more students start paying for the answers. Lynn uses this money to help around the house and buys her father a nice new shirt. Everyone may have passing grades now, but Lynn is still the best in her class, and the second best is Bank, a real genius like her that doesn't know anything about the cheating business. Just like Lynn, he doesn't have much money. He's in this school thanks to a scholarship. His mother has to pay for his admin fees with a shabby laundromat salary. His memory is outstanding, as proven by the way he can quickly recite pi, but he has no tolerance for cheating. Lynn and Bank aren't really friends, but the school sends them together to math competitions, and they easily win them by working together. After winning first place in Teen Genius, they are called by the principal, who informs them that there is a scholarship abroad that they can apply for. However, there is only one slot, meaning they'll be rivals from now on. It feels very nervous under all this pressure, but when he gets home and discovers his old mother is washing by hand because the machine broke, he still prefers to help her rather than study. One day, Bank is approached by classmate Tong, who wants to pay Bank for his help during the exam because the piano code is too hard for him. However, Bank turns him down, not wanting dirty money. During the exam, Lynn continues to use her hand signals as usual, but since Tong didn't memorize them, he keeps trying to peep at Lynn's paper. Expecting Tong would try to cheat, Bank is keeping an eye on him and notices his peeping. When he finishes his own exam, Bank stands up and pretends to trip next to Lynn's desk, showing her a note saying Tong is trying to cheat, and Lynn pretends to be grateful about it. Bank reports Tong's cheating to the teacher, but the teacher dismisses it because the test is divided into Set A and Set B, making cheating seem impossible. When Lynn and her friends realize the problem, they panic but quickly use hand gestures to identify their sets. Lynn, with Set A, gestures the answers to her group. Then, she swaps her paper with Tong's Set B and finishes his exercises, signaling the answers to the B group just before time runs out. After the test, Lynn and Tong are called to the principal's office because of Bank's report. They deny cheating, but the principal finds their papers mixed up. Lynn's father is summoned, and the principal decides not to expel Lynn due to her good record. Instead, she loses her scholarship. Lynn calls the principal out, saying that getting admin fees out of her father when she's supposed to have a scholarship is also cheating. The school is using other people's studies to make money, just like her. Furious, the principal revokes her chance to apply for an international scholarship at university level. So now Bank doesn't have a rival any longer. However, Bank feels terrible because he feels like he got it unfairly. When they get home, Lynn's dad scolds her for what she did, showing how disappointed he is by refusing to wear the shirt she got him anymore. Meanwhile, Grace goes to Pat's home to have dinner with his parents. They think Pat has gotten better at school thanks to Grace's influence, and they want her to try for the stick with Pat so they can go to Boston University together, even promising to pay for everything. Desperate, Grace calls Lynn and asks for her help. The first Lynn doesn't want to risk her reputation again, but this time Grace appeals to their friendship and promises a pay much larger than before. Lynn accepts, but as she leaves the building reading all the test rules, she realizes there's nothing she can do to cheat the system. She begins writing a note with an apology, but at that moment, she hears a man talking to someone in another country, and she notices all the clocks with different time zones on the wall. This gives her the perfect idea. The next day, Lynn tells Grace and Pat about her plan. They're going to take advantage of time zones. Lynn plans to take an international exam in Australia, where it occurs 4 hours earlier than in Thailand. She will memorize the answers and send them back to Thailand to sell to students taking the test there. Grace and Pat are tasked with finding clients to cover the expenses, allowing Lynn to afford attending Boston University. However, memorizing the entire test in a few minutes is impossible for Lynn alone, so she needs someone to memorize the other half. Bank, who despises cheating, is the only one capable of doing this. The night before the scholarship test, Bank is attacked by 2 thugs who accuse him of scratching their car and beat him up, leaving him unconscious in a landfill. Bank misses the exam and is devastated. When Lynn learns about this, she visits Bank and offers him a lucrative deal to join their cheating scheme. At first, Bank refuses, but Lynn changes his mind by pointing out how the system keeps cheating on poor people like them, and it's only fair to cheat back. Now that they have all the memorization covered, they finish planning their heist. Lynn and Bank will take the exam in Australia and hide phones inside the building's toilets. During the exam breaks, they'll go to relieve themselves and send the answers to Grace and Pat. Grace and Pat will print out the answers on barcode stickers that will be put on pencils. Then those pencils will be distributed on bikes to the paying students so they can have them right before their flights. To get even more clients, Pat makes a special presentation imitating Steve Jobs, which gets them to earn millions. With her editing skills, Grace makes fake paperwork, and Lynn convinces her dad to sign them by saying it's to participate in the Australian branch of Teen Genius. Now she can fly without an adult. Lynn and Bank spend the following days doing practice exams and running to a bathroom to text the answers to train their memory. The day before the exam, the group practices their crocodile tears and their alibis in case they get caught. When it's Pat's turn, he mentions in his story that he doesn't know Bank, calling him a loser that woke up in a landfill. Bank gets furious and jumps on Pat to beat him up, but the girls quickly pull them apart. As Bank explains, he never told anyone about the landfill. This means Pat paid those thugs and made Bank miss the test on purpose so he could help them instead. Bank decides to quit the cheating plan, but changes his mind when he sees a laundromat ad, realizing he doesn't want to live that life forever. Meanwhile, Lynn also wants to quit, but is convinced by Grace to stay, as Grace values their friendship. Lynn goes to find Bank, who agrees to rejoin because he feels he deserves compensation for the trouble he's faced. Lynn and Bank fly to Sydney, where they reconcile during the trip. On the morning of the test, they hide their phones in the bathrooms and head to the classroom. They complete the first part of the test quickly, allowing them time to memorize the answers during the break. In the bathrooms, Lynn and Bank type out their answers. Before sending his, Bank demands more money from Pat, citing his earlier beating. Pat reluctantly agrees to pay half now and the rest after the test. Bank receives the money and finally sends his answers. A few minutes later, Lynn and Bank return to the classroom and work on the second half of the test quickly as well. However, during the second break, they start to get in trouble. Bank gets to his stall fast, but it takes him a moment to remember all the answers. He does manage to send them, but the inspecting officer comes to knock on his door after noticing Bank is taking too long in there. Bank panics and accidentally breaks the toilet lid. He also tries to flush the phone down the toilet and fails, so he gets caught. Meanwhile, Lynn has to wait in line before she gets access to her stall. She manages to send all the answers, but she's also suspected of taking too long. Luckily, she thinks of hiding her phone in her shoes and escapes the bathroom safely. However, outside she discovers Bank being scolded and that all the students are being searched. So she hides the phone in the water cooler before returning to the classroom. Unfortunately, Bank doesn't return and Lynn has to do the last part alone. For a moment, she thinks she can't memorize this much, but her hand begins to move unconsciously and she realizes she can do this if she memorizes it like a music sheet. The trick works, but now she doesn't have much time left, so she uses a pencil to force herself to vomit. Pretending to feel sick, Lynn leaves the classroom, recovers the phone, and sneaks out of the building while avoiding the officers. Lynn's strange movements are noticed by security, and officers start chasing her. She runs to the subway while typing the answers on her phone, but someone bumps into her and breaks the screen. After some frantic pressing, she manages to send all the answers but misses her train and gets caught by an officer. As they're leaving, Lynn slips her phone into a random person's bag. Meanwhile, Pat and Grace are printing the answers when Lynn's worried dad shows up. He explains that he found the address on some paperwork and is concerned because Lynn isn't answering her phone. Pat and Grace lie, saying Lynn and Bank went on a trip together as a couple and didn't tell their dad because she thought he wouldn't approve. Satisfied with this explanation, Lynn's dad leaves and Pat and Grace finish preparing the pencils with answers just in time. Back at the interrogation, Lynn sees Bank, who signals her to stay out of it because he's lying to protect everyone. With tears in her eyes, Lynn deletes the photo they took together. Later, when Lynn goes home, Grace and Pat invite her to a party to celebrate their success. However, Lynn turns them down. She feels horrible because her scores were canceled and Bank got suspended, so she refuses to help the couple any longer, pointing out that university exams aren't multiple choice anyway. Then she calls her dad to pick her up, and when he asks about her boyfriend, Lynn has a breakdown and confesses everything to him. This gets her expelled from school. Later, Lynn leaves the group chat, ignoring Grace's pleas for her to join the party. Now she lost a friend, and the victory doesn't feel so good anymore. When Lynn tries to apply to a local university to study education, the officer reminds her that a teacher has to impart good morals too, which makes Lynn feel even guiltier. After the interview is over, Lynn is surprised to get a text from Bank, asking her to come over. When she arrives at his home, she notices he's been using the money to greatly improve the equipment of the laundromat. Bank explains he wants to make more money helping other students with their tests, and this time it'll be safer with a wider client base. When Lynn refuses, Bank threatens her to expose the whole affair. However, Lynn tells him she's already made her choice. Sometime later, Lynn goes to see the Stick organization, and with her father's encouragement and mind, she confesses the whole thing.